Hi everyone. Today our session 2 for introduction to 5G, right? So today I'm going to discuss about your 5G network architecture and basically the some functionalities of our AMF, right? So if you see here, right? So this is really your 5G system, or you can say your 5Gs. 5Gs includes 5G core network, right? So you can see here, this is your 5G core network. And then you have your 5G access network that is here. And then you have your user equipment, right? So 5G core network, that is this one, right? Core network. So this provides connectivity to internet, right? And application servers. So 5G access network जो आपका हो सकता है वो दो तरह का हो सकता है. First one is your 3GPP next generation radio access network, that is your NGRAN, and second one is your non 3GPP access network, right? So 3GPP has defined both the architectures, right? So your reference point architecture and service-based architecture. So now we're gonna discuss in detail about reference point architecture. So what happens in reference? So this is a diagram of reference point architecture here that you're seeing on the screen, right? So a reference point architecture basically based upon your network elements. So you see network element 1, 2, and 3 here, right? So, so it's based upon a set of network elements, basically, which uses this point-to-point interfaces to connect these network elements. So this is your point-to-point interface, right? These are connected via points, right? And signaling. So what happens? So these end-to-end points, right? So there are some procedure which are defined between these these points. So these are known as signaling procedures. So these are, let's say, these are set A procedures specified for this interface. There could be some set B procedures, right? So this reference, what happens sometimes, this reference point architecture can also lead to repetition of some specifications. Let's say, if the same signaling procedure is used across multiple interfaces, right? So we're gonna go in detail basically how this reference architecture look like. The other one is service based, so we won't be going into detail of service based. So we'll be looking at reference point system architecture. So I'm going to draw basically your 5G architecture here. So we'll start with the user equipment. That is your UE, right? And then you have 5G access network, right? So between UE and 5G access network, you have interface that is known as your UU interface. Okay. Now in 5G, you have this access network connected to your UPS. And then this is further connected to your data network. Now we'll see what are these interfaces there. So I'm gonna take this blue ink. So between your access network, 5G access network and UPF, you have this as an N3 interface. And then UPF and data network, you have this N6 interface. Now, if you talk about this inter UPF, right? So UPF is nothing but your user plane function, right? So if you talk about inter UPF, right? So that is connected via N9 interface. So this is your this, you can say, this is your path for data plane, upside and down both. Okay. Now we're gonna go more towards your other elements that are your, so see, we were having MME in the LT, right? But in 5G we have the split functionality for MME here. We have EMF and SMS, right? So AMF is nothing but your access and mobility management function. So I'm gonna draw it here somewhere so that we have proper visibility. Access and mobility management function. Okay. And then we have one more here, right? That is your SMS, session management function, right? Okay. So now what happens? So we have UE, then 5G core network, then this would be connected to your AMF via N1 N2 interface. Now I'll connect this N2 to directly this 5G core network via AMF, and then N1 interface goes all the way down to UE. So basically in LT we were having UE and AME, so there were so similar interface, it's there as N1, right? So NAS singing protocol would be going over there. And then we have AMF and SMF. So AMF and SMF we have interface N11, and your SMF is connected to UPF via N4 interface. Further moving, so we have this AUSF and UDM also there. So I'm gonna draw AUSF here. So AUSF is nothing but your authentication server function, which is used for authentication, and you have UDM also there. So UDM is nothing but unified data management. So AUSF is authentication, AU authentication, SF server function. So we have N13 interface between them. Okay, and then this AUSF is connected to AMF via N12 interface, and UDM is connected to AMF via N8 interface. Uh, if you take it for first instance, right? So पहली बार में आप लोगों को एक चीज याद करने में time लगेगा. So maybe we can draw it again and again so that we can easily remember that, right? Now SMF is connected to your UDM via N10 interface. You just need to understand how these are connected. So even if you don't forget some of the interface, that is fine. But just go through it again and again. You don't need to rectify this every time. But if you go through this again and again, you will easily remember that. So now we're gonna go for PCF, that is your policy control function. I'm going to delete this first so that we have some space over there. Okay. So now we have PCF, that is your policy control function here, right? And PCF is connected to, three things. So first we're going to connect it via SMF here. Sorry. So I'm going to connect it via SMF here. So SMF is connected to N7 interface, and PCF is also connected to your AMF, right? And that is via your N15 interface. Okay. So now it further goes up. So this, we don't have any connection here like AUSF, UDM, and PCF. So this is just a access mobility function SMF. These are connected to AUSF, UDM, and then PCF. And further we have this application function here. Application function. and this is connected to PCF only, and this is your, what we say, I guess this is NS or N5, as this is NS interface. And we have another one more thing here that is connected to our access mobility management function, that is your NSSF. So NSSF is network slice selection function, right? And this is connected to your AMF via N22 interface. So if I show you the whole diagram on the screen, right? This is how it looks like. I know this is bit a rough diagram. Maybe you can, if you want, you can refer this the specifications or 5G in bullets for your reference for better understanding. So this so just to clarify here, this N9 interface is your inter UPF there, and one more thing, this access and mobility function, right? AMF inter AMF is your N14. So, and this, if you want to connect AMF to your MME, right, 4G, then there is N26 interface. That is very commonly used, this interface for your handovers from LT to NR. So this is your, if I draw something, any other color we have. Okay, this one. So this is your data path and rest is your control plane, right? So there is one exception to this user plane and control plane function, right? So this right part is, this one is your totally separate, that is user plane. But there is an exception to user plane control plane function. What is that? So user plane data belonging to your SMS, right? So user plane data belonging to your SMS, what happens? So that would be transferring using NAS protocol. Okay. So this thing you should remember, your SMS would be going via NAS protocol. Okay. So what happens? So between UE and your AMF. So so what happens for sending this SMS, right? We have another function that is known as your SMS function, SMSF, right? So maybe it can be connected to AMF using, you can say, this N20 interface, but again, this is an optional thing, right? So basically this point-to-point architecture which we just saw, right? So this network element, so we have different interfaces like N1, N2, N3, right? So basically these interfaces are known as reference points. और ये आपका mention है 3GPP specification से TS 23.501, right? जैसे कि आप बात करें N3 रेफरेंस पॉइंट की, राइट? सो वो N3 आपका कहाँ पे है? N3 आपका है 5G एक्सेस नेटवर्क के बीच में है और आपका यूपीएफ के बीच में है, राइट? दैट इज योर यूजर प्लेन. Hey guys, looks like the pen battery was over, so we're back again. So we were discussing reference point system architecture, right? So there is one interesting key aspect here that we're gonna discuss as a difference between your 4G and 5G, right? So important characteristic is your, basically, we can say, separation of user plane and control plane, right? So what happens? So basically, if we talk about 4G, right? So in 4G, what used to happen? So there was P gateway, So P gateway used to do both the things, right? Your control plane thing, control plane functionality, and your user plane functionality, right? So control plane functionality is basically your IP address allocation, right? And user plane functionality is your data forwarding. Data forwarding, right? Now what happens? So in case of 5G, so 5G, what happens? There is the same task of IP allocation is done by SMF, right? And user plane function, your UPF provides the data forwarding. So that's how these things gonna work here. So user plane and control plane allows basically, अब यहाँ पे हमारे पास separation है तो कुछ flexibility भी आती है, right? So user plane, control plane are independent. So these provides basically, let's say scaling कर सकते हैं हम control plane user plane पे, right? So example की बात करें तो operators can add more users, right? So let's say this is control plane and then you have user plane, right? So you can add more number of users here, okay? User 1, user 2, user 3, user 4, user 5. And what you can do, you can centralize the control plane functions, right? So basically this would help in minimizing your latency, which is the key aspect of your 5G, right? So these are the points about architecture. So if you have any question regarding our 5G architecture, so please post that in the comment section. Before going to end, we're gonna discuss, maybe let's discuss this functionality of AMF also, like what AMF does, right? Okay. Okay, so basically we were discussing your service-based system architecture. Now we are going forward to discuss the functionalities of your AMF. So basically you can say AMF provides connectivity right here. AMF is nothing but your access and mobility management function, right? So AMF, basically you can say AMF is a control plane function. So AMF, and then in the 5G core network, and the primary. So first what we're gonna do, we're gonna discuss some primary responsibilities, right? So we have some responsibilities like very first thing, if you see, registration management, right? And then second thing we have as an connection management. This is first, this is second, this is third. Third one is your reachability management. And fourth one is your mobility management. Okay, so we're gonna discuss them one by one, right? So very first thing is your registration management. So registration management basically allows our UE to register with the 5G system, right? So what happens? So there is a condition, right? So a UE must complete registration procedure. क्यों करना चाहिए registration procedure complete UE को? ताकि वो 5G services receive करने के लिए authorize हो जाए, right? So registration say, if you see registration say what happens, basically there are two states which are associated. So very first state is your RMD registered. right? And second thing is RM register. तो बेसिकली रजिस्ट्रेशन के बाद क्या होता है आपका, सो RM इज नथिंग बट योर रजिस्ट्रेशन मैनेजमेंट. सो रजिस्ट्रेशन मैनेजमेंट से क्या होता है कि आपका जो यूई है वो RM डी रजिस्टर्ड स्टेट से RM रजिस्टर्ड स्टेट में आ जाता है, राइट? अब रजिस्ट्रेशन के बाद क्या होता है आपके AMF में, यू कैन से एक यूई कंटेक्स्ट क्रिएट हो जाता है, राइट? यूई कंटेक्स्ट क्या होता है, इसमें यूई से रिलेटेड इंफॉर्मेशन होती है, ट्रैकिंग एरिया या फिर यूई की कुछ आइडेंटिटी हो सकती है, राइट? सो जो भी पैरामीटर्स होते हैं उसको हम कंबाइनली यूई कंटेक्स्ट बोलते हैं, एंड दीज कंटेक्ट्स आर स्टोर्ड इन AMF, राइट? सो AMF इंटरेक्ट्स विद अदर नेटवर्क फंक्शन ड्यूरिंग दिस रजिस्ट्रेशन प्रोसीजर्स. वो कौन कौन से हैं दूसरे जिनसे AMF कनेक्ट होता है? दैट इज योर that are your SMF, UDM, and your PCS, right? So this is about registration management. Now we are going to discuss this second thing, right? That is your connection management. So connection management में क्या होता है कि कनेक्शन मैनेजमेंट बेसिकली क्यों यूज करते हैं हम इसका यूज किया जाता है एस्टैब्लिश और रिलीज करने के लिए कंट्रोल प्लेन सिग्नलिंग किस किस के बीच में, आपके यूई एंड AMF के बीच में, राइट? सो और हमको पता है यूई और AMF के बीच में कौन सा इंटरफेस होता है, N1 इंटरफेस होता है, राइट? सो when we establish N1 control signaling between UE and AMF, so what happens, UE goes from this CM is your connection management, CM idle to CM connected state, right? So रजिस्टर्ड रजिस्ट्रेशन केस में RM था, यहाँ कनेक्शन मैनेजमेंट केस में CM रहेगा, राइट? सो N1 सिग्नलिंग कनेक्शन बेसिकली ये क्या अलाउ करता है, यहाँ पे नए सिग्नलिंग अलाउ करता है, राइट? Okay, so now what happens, so next message would be exchanged between UE and AMF. So और नेक्स्ट सिग्नलिंग आपका 3GPP में भी डिफाइंड है, so 3GPP और 24.501 में, उसमें भी आप नेक्स्ट के स्पेसिफिकेशंस देख सकते हैं. सो बेसिकली यू कैन से AMF आपका क्या होता है, टर्मिनेशन पॉइंट होता है विद इन द कोर नेटवर्क फॉर योर इंटीग्रिटी प्रोटेक्शन एंड साइफरिंग ऑफ नेक्स्ट मैसेज. एंड साइफरिंग, राइट, ऑफ नेक्स्ट मैसेज. सो बेसिकली टर्मिनेशन पॉइंट ऑफ जो आपका नेट सिग्नलिंग होता है, तो उसका टर्मिनेशन पॉइंट फॉर नेट सिग्नलिंग कैन बी ईदर योर AMF या फिर आपका SMF हो सकता है, ओके? अगर हम बात करें नेस नेस प्रोसीजर्स की, कौन कौन से प्रोसीजर्स आते हैं नेस में, तो नेस में आपका पहला आप मान सकते हैं रजिस्ट्रेशन प्रोसीजर आता है, राइट? एंड देन योर ऑथेंटिकेशन, and then third one you can say your service request, and fourth one is your identity request. तो आपके लिए एक सवाल है, आपको बताना सर्विस रिक्वेस्ट मैसेज यूई की तरफ से AMF को कब जाता है, ठीक है? आप ये कमेंट सेक्शन में बता सकते हैं मेरे को लेटर ऑन. एंड नेक्स्ट इज योर जो कि हमारे नेक्स्ट सिग्नलिंग प्रोटोकॉल के अंदर आते हैं, दोज आर योर PDU सेशन, एस्टैब्लिशमेंट, मॉडिफिकेशन एंड रिलीज, राइट? सो दोज आर बेसिकली हैंडल्ड बाय योर SMF, राइट? व्हाट आर दोज? PDU session, establishment, modification, and release, right? So these comes under SMF. तो ये आपके यूई और SMF के बीच में इनिशिएट होते हैं. Where AMF would be your transparent container, जो कि ये सिर्फ मैसेज को क्या करेगा, फॉरवर्ड करने का काम करता है, राइट? So coming towards next point, third one. So we have discussed registration management, connection management. Third is your reachability management. सो रीचेबिलिटी मैनेजमेंट में क्या होता है कि हमें इंश्योर या फिर नेटवर्क को इंश्योर करना होता है बेसिकली कि यूई ऑलवेज आपका रीचेबल है या नहीं है, राइट? सो यूई रीचेबल कैसे है या नहीं, उसका कैसे हाउ डू वी नो एग्जैक्टली, लाइक वाया पेजिंग, राइट? सो इफ इट इज पॉसिबल टू पेज द यूई when there is a requirement to establish a mobile terminated connection, right? That is your reachability management. So let's say what happens when UE is paged, or let's say after paging. So if a UE which is in CM idle state, right? CM idle state. So via paging, it goes into CM connected state. It's similar to a connection management. So the AMF supports reachability management by storing location information as a part of UE context, right? So UE context have the location information of that particular UE that is stored in your AMF as a part of reachability management. So UE context, let's say this is your UE context, and that includes basically location in the sense list of tracking areas, TA1, TA2, right? Where UE is registered, right? Similar thing used to happen in LT also. So UE context can also more specific information भी हो सकता है. Let's say just like sales information could be there, or let's say nodes information. So these things could also be there in detail. So there is one more thing, UE which are configured to use, right? Miko. Have you heard about this Miko term? So Miko is nothing but your mobile initiated connection only, right? So in mobile initiated connection, what happens? Only the UE has this authority to establish connection, basically, as the name says, right? So these UEs, these specific UEs, you cannot page. These UEs cannot be paged, right? And only able to establish MO connections. And again, this CM idle state से वो लोग कहाँ पे चले जाएंगे? CM connected state में, right? So we have discussed three things here: one, registration, then connection, then reachability, and then fourth comes as mobility management. Right? So in case of mobility management, so mobility management, what happens? So mobility management is used to maintain the knowledge of, again, UE's location, right? UE location within the network. So let's say, so what happens when, so firstly UE do initial registration, right? Initial registration. So now what happens after doing this initial registration? So to keep alive the UE, basically what UE does, this periodic registration updates, right? So one thing is this, your periodic registration update, periodic registration update. And second thing is basically if you move out of tracking area, right? So there is tracking area update. So let's say UE registered in tracking area TA1 and TA2, and if it is moving to TA3, then it needs to have this tracking area update, right? Why this is important? This is important to maintain the UE's location within the network. So these are basically our four important things here, right? Now, We're going to discuss about somewhat about responsibility of AMF, right? Like we have this new protocol that is your NGAP, right? Next Generation Application Protocol. So I'm going to write it here. NGAP protocol. So AMF also, handles this or basically responsible for handling this NGAP protocol. So which is basically you can say your AMF and your base station, right? AMF and your uh, GNB. So there you have NGAP protocol, right? So and NGAP protocol basically 3UP specifications also defines as an 38.413, right? You can refer this 3UP spec. And if we talk about LT, so this is also equivalent to your, you can say this ENB was there, right? ENB and your S1 AP protocol was there, and this was connected to MME, right? So this is similar to that point. So now categories that involves NGAP signaling procedures, right? So I'm going to write down some of them. NGAP protocols मतलब कहाँ use होता है आपका, right? So very first thing is your PDU session management, right? Second one is your you can say UE mobility management procedure. Third one is your about we're gonna learn about NGAP something description you can say, right? Okay. So the very first thing is PDU session management, right? So PDU session management, basically these procedures are used, these are handled by your SMS. And let's say if you want to set up, modify, release the resources, you're going to use PDU session establishment, the very first thing. Second thing is your UE management, UE mobility management procedures. So UE mobility management procedures are basically, you can say your handover procedures, right? So NGAP path switching, basically that used to happen in LT also, right? S1A path switching, so that would be happening here. And if you see this NGAP path, right? So how it goes. So let's say if I draw here, right? This is our UE. And then this is our, right? So, okay. So this is our GNB. And then we have as an AMF, right? So UE would be connected to NAS, right? Via UU interface. And then GNB to this AMF via NGAP protocol, right? So this is nothing but your end-to-end interface. So